or 8th grade and under, if you'll come and sit right here. So if you're junior high, senior high, mentality-wise, you need to go to the nursery, buddy. All right, yeah, if you're younger, all right, so I guess it's just you guys. What we're going to do then, we're going to have junior church. I guess she doesn't want to come up. That's all right. I'll look at you where you sit, and I'll look at you two guys. And what we're going to do is we're going to do junior church, but we're actually going to make it like junior high church. So I don't know, what grade are you going into this fall? 7th grade. 9th grade. It'll be 9th grade. Be driving before too long. All right. So we're going to have junior church plus, and you guys are just going to overhear what we're going to say to the young people. And so if you've been paying attention, the last 2 or 3 weeks we've been looking at Jude. And there are some good nuggets to pull out of Jude. And last week we talked about false teachers within the church. And this week we want to talk, you guys are a little too close. Could you mind jumping back one pew? Because I'm a space nerd and I'm a spitter. So if you guys would scoot back. Be like a salad bar shield in front of you. You don't want to have me drooling on you. Thank you. Too close for comfort. We talked about false teachers within the church. This week we want to talk about false teachers that are out in the world. And some of them don't even know that they're false teachers. You guys won't be too long till you go back to school. A couple weeks. You said August, what, 30th? 26th. Okay, it's coming up. We have kids that were in our first or second youth group over in Indiana. They always start school August 1st or 2nd, whatever, if it's not a weekend day. They start early August. That's insane. But as you guys go back to school, I want you guys to be armed with the reality that not everybody is believers. Not everybody is a believer, and that's just the way it is. Your schools, what we're teaching in schools, is not from a Christian worldview. It's from a humanist worldview. We have Christian teachers, yep. We have Christian administrators, yep. But the curriculum, what they're teaching you, doesn't believe that Jesus is God's Son, doesn't believe in the Bible by and far. So those are the false teachers that are around us. It started last week, NFL. And it's practice up at St. Vincent and the big practice at Latrobe Field. And from now until early February, you're going to have NFL. It's going to be football, football, football. That used to get me all yippee, yippee. Now I don't really care because of a lot of their attitudes. But nonetheless, you're going to have before you, in front of you, presented to you NFL, 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 and here's what's up. Right now, before the very first game, everybody has the same record. Everybody's 0-0. Everybody wants to have a winning record. Everybody wants to win the Super Bowl, and here's what's going to happen. There are going to be pretenders, and there's going to be contenders. There are going to be people that want to be, I'll just say Cleveland Browns, and then there are people that are going to be. And I'll say probably the Steelers, New England, 2 or 3 other teams that are going to be, but they're going to be pretenders and contenders. And we're called, you guys are called to contend for our faith. There's a game, no, there's a battle. There's a battle going on outside of these walls for the very souls of people, your very soul. It's serious. It's a sober situation that we kind of take lightly. But the world's after you, Satan is after you, God is after you. And there are pretenders and there are contenders. The big Dallas Cowboy coach, Tom Landry, for years would say, I don't care how good you look with the shoulder pads on, I care how you perform when the game is on. I don't care what we look like, how we impress other people, here's what matters, how we contend for the faith when the battle's going on outside these walls, and it's a serious, sober fight, and I want you guys to pay attention to that. And so does Paul, so does Jude, so does Peter, Jesus. And so we're encouraged to get into this battle, and that's what we have before us. I have some scripture, some quotes about scripture we're going to make available after. I'll have these guys post them out later. But if you look at your outline real quick, I just have two things that we're going to look at, and then we're done. It was about a year and a half ago, overheard on a talk radio, conservative talk radio. They're talking about the Bible, and let's be real. Let's not kid ourselves. All of us in this room, let's not kid ourselves. The Bible is getting less and less respect, less and less honor, and less as a guide, as a map for our life. Let's just call it like it is. That's what's happening in our culture. So let's just call that shot. On this talk radio program, someone called in, and people were calling in. They were either pro or against, and a lot of it for, but some against. And one guy called in, and he said this: "You Christians are fools. You're all fools, and you're ignorant. The Bible is full of nothing but bad history and worse science." Bad history and worse science. So there's your outline right there. Bad history and worse science. And we're going to look at that. And how do you answer that? How do you guys answer that when you go to school? Oh, the Bible, yeah, that's cute. And it's being dismissed. It's a fairy tale. No, it's not. So just bad history. If you were to go, and we've done this before with Luke, if you were going to go to the Gospel of Luke and the book of Acts, if you were to go to his history books and look at how he researched and what he did, and I don't want to spend too much time just specifically about Luke, but Luke was very thorough. And he's writing to his friend Theophilus. We don't know much of the details of that friendship, but he said, I want you to know with certainty, I want you to know that I have investigated thoroughly. Now, when there was a shooting out here, what was that, a year ago or so? When there was a shooting out here this spring, whenever it was, I came in the office and there were state cops everywhere, and they were going all around the neighborhood investigating thoroughly, trying to get as many clues as possible. There's a hole in the siding right by my window here that's from probably a lawnmower chucking a rock. They thought it might have been a bullet. So Faith, I didn't know it was Faith and her gang. I come in and my books were all this and my shelves were all torn. Like, it looks like a mess, but I knew somebody was in. They were looking for a bullet. They were thoroughly investigating what happened. Thoroughly investigated what happened with Jesus. Well, let me tell you about this. And I'll look at you guys, and I'll look directly at you guys, and you guys just listen in. The very fact that Jesus existed is a historical fact. Has any of you ever seen George Washington? No. Do you doubt that he existed? No. That's because it's historical fact. There is enough evidence from generations who did see George Washington, both American and English and French and Native Americans. There are enough people that witnessed that when things were wrote about George Washington, they didn't question it. They acknowledged that's a historical fact. You'll question, anybody here, I know Les, you're old, but have you seen George Washington? No, nobody has seen George Washington. Do you doubt he existed? Absolutely not. Historical fact. Jesus in existence, historical fact. So that is driven, look here, that is driven right into world history. Absolutely in the world. Jesus existed. You don't need a Bible exclusively to tell you about that. There are Roman history books. There are Jewish history books. There are Egyptian history. There are world history books that talk about Jesus on this planet. The fact that Jesus was a teacher and that he spent many of his days going around what we call the Holy Lands, that's historical fact, like George Washington slept here. George Washington all around Western PA, all around Northeast. Jesus did the same thing. Those facts are facts. Don't need a Bible fairy tale to talk about that. The fact that Jesus was arrested in the month of Nisi, We call it April or Abib. And somewhere between mid-March and mid-April, depending on the full moon, Jewish calendar is driven by the moon. He was arrested on the 14th day of Nisan. He was tried. He was tried by Jewish friends, like church leadership. He was tried by Roman authorities, United States type deal. He was found guilty and to be crucified. Those are all facts. That he was buried on a Friday, those are historical facts. That the tomb on Sunday morning is a historical fact, that those who were outside of Jesus and believing in Jesus as Messiah, those who witnessed that or knew about that historical fact, they didn't believe, but they realized that the tomb was empty. The question for you is, how was the tomb empty? Well, there's a couple theories. If he didn't raise from the dead, bodily resurrection, if he didn't raise from the dead, well, he never really died, is one of them. He passed out. And then when he got into the cool of the grave, which wasn't that cool, but he got in the cool of the grave, he revived, rolled the rock away, took out the Roman guards, convinced a bunch of people, never really died. See, look, I'm cool. Jesus never died. Someone stole the body. The disciples stole the body. They were humiliated. These guys that were hiding, they stole the body. Different theories for the empty tomb. We believe from our scripture of an empty tomb because of resurrection. That's presented in our scripture. Luke, back to Luke. Luke, in his presentation of the early history, he talks about 32 different countries. He talks about 54 cities. He talks about 9 islands and doesn't get any of them wrong. So this clown that calls in, sorry about that, this guy that calls in to the conservative radio and says, you knuckleheads who believe this, is nothing but bad history, that's inaccurate. The Bible stands up very, very well in history. Very well. And I have a bunch of quotes. It's front and back. And there's a good website you can go to, Creation Wiki. You've heard of Wikipedia if you're familiar with computer stuff. Wikipedia is for the world. There's a Creation Wiki. And it's the same kind of deal. It's a resource for people who believe in the creation. And you just type in certain things and it blows up the world for you. There are all kind of quotes about Scripture. How reliable our Scripture is. Because what you guys will hear, if you haven't already heard it, what you'll hear is the Bible is just bad history, worse science. Have you heard that at work? Have you talked about the Bible and been ridiculed? Dismissed? Well, I used to believe that. That was years ago. I know a lot of your teachers will just totally dismiss it. You go to college, most universities are wide open liberal, and you get laughed at, ridiculed, or kicked out. I have this one quote. This is a guy who he's a Jew, he's passed away, early 90s, I believe. But in his heyday, in the 40s, 50s, into the 60s, he was a Jew, he didn't believe that Jesus was Messiah, so he was a non-messianic Jew. But he was a Jew, and he was an archaeologist, and he was very, very smart. He was born near Cincinnati. There's a college dedicated to him. He was pretty important with Bible land archaeology. And what he said in the late 50s, and was dismissed, is kind of cool, dismissed in the late 60s, but reaffirmed in the 90s. What he said in the late 50s was this: it may be stated categorically, like a broad brushstroke, it may be stated categorically that no archaeological discovery has ever controverted a biblical reference. That's smart words with too many syllables for saying they haven't dug anything up that disproves the Bible. Do you hear what I just said? They haven't dug anything up from the Holy Lands that goes against Scripture. In fact, what they have dug up, if it does anything with Scripture, pro or con, it goes thumbs up. This guy was a non-believer. He didn't believe in the biblical flood. But what he did say was, he was a unique fellow. He said, we've dug nothing up that goes against, that's huge. That's huge. And I don't want to spend too much time on that except to say, one of the things that the world, I forget what, there was a town, this guy that he said something and it was gone against in the late 60s. He said that a town, they dug up a town in the late 50s, and he said this confirmed Scripture. This little town was found in Scripture. I forget the name of Bethpage. I forget which one it is. But and then it was, oh no, the science world found, oh no, the Bible must be wrong because the town is actually over here. And so it went around for about 10 years, like, nope, that Gluch, forget his name, Dr. Nelson Gluck. He must have been wrong. He must have been wrong. So there is his whole thing. They tossed everything out. Everything he ever did, tossed out because they thought here, and then 30 years later, 25 years later, they find that, oops, it really was the right town. They didn't rescind their criticism, but they were wrong. So the whole science world, you hear what I'm saying, guys? The momentum of the science world said, no, you're wrong, dude. The Bible's wrong. And all of a sudden, dig it up, and here the Bible actually is solid history. So there's a pretender for you. The people that say the Bible isn't reliable, that they're pretending, and you guys need to contend for it. You need to stick up for God. You need to stick up for God. We'll look at 1 Peter chapter 3 in a minute and realize you need to be ready. You see, if you remember, you guys probably won't because you're pretty young. If you remember when I first came here, about the first 2 or 3 months, I was talking about what our church psyche ought to be, what our church attitude, what our church posture ought to be. And I talked about a guy, Elton Trueblood, pretty smart guy, smarter than me, and he basically said the church ought to be like the military, base and field. Remember that? You come in here like you're like a soldier. If you go back to World War I, World War II, you're out in the field, in the battlefield all week long, and you come back to base. You come back for some R&R, you come back for some better food, you come back for some rest, and you come back for re-instruction, rebuilding your team, rebuilding your psyche, and then you go back out to the field. And there's a certain element that the church ought to be that you guys, we are out all week long contending, battling for the faith, sticking up for the Bible. This guy they called into the radio, the next half hour or so, there were good lobs thrown that were cruel. I would say good, they were solid, they were sharp criticism of that guy. That guy's an idiot, he doesn't know what the Bible's great. But there was no real contending. There was no real good argument back for this bad history, bad science. It's solid. It's a solid book. So bad history. Don't believe it. Then worse science. It's just full of worse science. That's not true either. There are two camps. And that goes on your outline. Two camps. I'm 59. I think Barry's about the same age. About my age group, a little bit older and a little bit younger. When we were junior high-ish age, it was pretty accelerated and getting worse. Sam, I'm going to see how competent, I'm going to put you on the spot. If you can dial up a map of Pittsburgh, throw it up on the screen. Back when we were younger, junior high, high school, there were two camps, and look up here. There was the science camp. And the science camp was really putting into turbo boost evolution. And we were taught with no gray area at all that we evolved from apes. And if you have in your mind, you've probably seen it a gazillion times, the various stages. You have on the far end you have an ape, and then on the other hand you have a Greg Pelk, a really solid structure. And the laughter. And then you have these various stages in between. And the idea or the concept of theory was that at one time our ancestry was apes, and now we are humans. And we evolved macro. large. We evolved from one species to another. And here's what you need to know. Well, I won't get into that too much. So that was one camp. The other camp was Camp Christian. Other camps, the faith camp. Like, no, we're created. God did it. This is now it's Big Bang. This is 6 days. This is He created ex nihilo. He created all from nothing, everything out of nothing. And so those two camps were distant. Are you ready? We'll see what happens. Are you familiar with Route 28 in Pittsburgh? If you're not too familiar with it, if you've seen any pictures in the last couple, 3 weeks of the flooding along Route 28 with the Jersey barriers separating the flooding, it's basically one of the parkway type routes. It's not the parkway, but they have those Jersey barriers that are, 3.5, 4 feet tall. And in a recent storm, and then a couple times in the last year or so, one side of 28 is like completely underwater. And it's just about coming over the top of that Jersey barrier, water squirting through it. And the other side's just wet. It's just been rained on, but that's Route 28. Are we ready? It's coming up. If you're familiar with downtown Pittsburgh, PNC Park, right? PNC Park and Route 28 pretty much comes down right to that. It's on the north side of the Allegheny River. Oh, I should have got my pointer. Let me go get my pointer. That's a good map, too. I told you guys we're going to be a junior church. This is what happened. This Route 28 is right here on that side of the Allegheny River. Then there's a route, I think it's a 130. It's Allegheny River Boulevard. That's the road that when it floods, about 4 or 5 years ago, it floods, gets underwater and people got trapped, a mother and some daughters that died. So now they put the gates, familiar with the gates? The gates come down Allegheny. That's on this side of the river, and that's the zoo. Those gates are right about there. Greg, you're weird. I know. Here's what's happening, if you will. This is science camp. This is Christian camp. And what's happening, and it's not getting much press, but what's happening is, because in reality, this Route 28 goes up that way into Armstrong County. This route here, Allegheny River, goes up to Penn Hills and kind of fades out that way. There is a road that goes right along the river, but it goes further in distance. And if you were to believe the unspoken attitude, science has nothing to do with creation. And they're getting further and further apart. And the sneaky little secret that is cool for you guys is that there are bridges being built between these two. There are bridges in Pittsburgh. It takes a long time to build a bridge. Doesn't take long to wash one out. Doesn't take too long to rust one out. But it takes a long time to build a bridge. And there are bridges, and look up here, are you with me? There are bridges being built between the secular world and the Christian world. There are scientists that are saying, well, you know what? They're saying 3 things. And that goes to your outline. They're saying, first of all, it goes on your outline, 2 camps, more bridges are being built. Number 1, random chance. Sam, if you'll throw up one of our favorite people. This is Arlo. Hey, screen went blank. Arlo's blank. There you go. Oh, it's Forrest Gump. Well, Arlo, same thing. Let's read what it says. Remember that movie? I'm not a smart man, but I know what love is. I may not be a smart man, but a theoretical and purposeless random chance explosion, Big Bang Theory, of mystery matter doesn't give rise to intelligibility, can't read, truth, knowledge, on your outline. Random chance. It doesn't just happen. And so what's happening? And stay with me. And you can shut that screen off and you can roll up the screen if you want. Here's what's happening. Stay with me. You guys, stay with me. The gap between science and creation is being closed. And there are scientists saying, you know what? They won't get on much TV program. They won't get interviewed. But they're basically saying, this couldn't have just happened. This could not have just happened. Now, I'll grant you that the universe is expanding. And so there might have been, God may have used a Big Bang in some way, but God was the source. God was the initiator of it, and things are going out. That you can acknowledge that. There's a good book out, and I gave it to a couple parents about dinosaurs. Dinosaurs in the Bible. There's room for dinosaurs in the Bible. There's reference to it in the book of Job. There are fossils found, which would kind of indicate a quick, massive flood. We'll leave that out of the picture. How are we finding fossils on every continent up high? Because God rained down from above, and the springs from the deep, and that's being all charted too. How the volcanoes of water on the ocean floor, pretty cool. But there are scientists saying the random chance doesn't just happen, that there has to be one intelligent source. There's room for God in Scripture, in science. You also need to know a couple things, that the Bible really isn't a science book. It's really a book of God's dealing with mankind that includes some science. But to go to it as a science book, you go to it as a communication book, as a dealing book. So random chance. Number 2, first law of thermodynamics. Sound smart, don't I? First law of thermodynamics, no matter. If you go to Genesis chapter 2, verse 1, it said when he was done, it was completed. It was completed. In fact, let me go to that. Genesis chapter 2, verse 1. That's an old book. Thus the heavens and the earth were completed in all their vast array. That's a universal term. When you say all or everything, that encompasses everything. The heavens and the earth were completed in all their vast array. There's no new matter. And what they're discovering, and look back up here again, these camps, and this science camp that used to deny a lot of, science not always did that. Didn't always do that. But here in the last, 300 or 400 years, when did the modern movement start, Arlo? The modernist movement, pay attention, kid. The modernist movement where they started using science instead of discovering God's world to antagonize against God's world.
You're probably getting toward like the latter part of the 1700s.
Okay.
Toward that.
Right. That's what I thought, 300 or 400 years ago, the modernist movement. Before that, science was used as a tool to discover the secrets that God had. Discovery tool. Now it's a separation tool. Has been. Now it's starting to close some gaps. All right, number 3, then we're done. Kind after kind. You have to know, and I'll let you do the research because it's out there. You have to know that chart from ape to upright human is built on so few bones. You go down to Carnegie Science Center and you'll see some of this stuff. They'll find a wrist bone, a rib, 2, 3, 4 other bones, and they'll create a giant structure, a skeleton out of that in the evolution chain. And there's always the missing link. They'll not find the missing link because it's not there. Apes give birth to apes. If we evolved, are you with me? If we evolved from apes, why are there still apes? And that is so basic. That is so basic. But we're supposed to just believe that. It takes more faith. I contend this. Faith, the word faith, faith is hope, is evidence, is a hoping of things to be, that there's good. You exercise, Seth, you exercise faith every time you drive. Your father exercised hope every time you drive. But your faith when you drive is, I'm going down the right side of the road. And because of a reasonable history, factual history and reasonable expectation, when Mr. Red drives at you, you have faith that he will stay on his right side of the road. And all of a sudden your faith becomes sight when he passes you. We exercise faith all the time. They have faith in this change from kind to kind. We have faith in Scripture that God created. Ours is, I think, a more reasonable, more valid faith, to be honest with you. They'll lose you in big terms, they'll lose you with big research, but they're humanists, they're naturalists. We're Christians. It's reasonable. So to that end, Riley, if you'll come up here. Tim, if you'll come over, and Mike, if you'll come over. I'm going to have you have prayer with this guy. I really concern myself with our young people. All of our young people. I'm just picking on this one kid today, but all of our young people. And here's what and then you guys. We are in a battle. We are in a battle for your own soul and for the soul of our loved ones. And so, Sam, this speaks to you and your wife. But it speaks to us as uncles in the faith, and you guys, and you guys, and you guys, and your kids. That we've got to pass on this baton, like a relay race, this baton of faith. So Stacy calls me, I don't know, June, late May. So I got to get Riley to read something. He's a unique kid, and I wanted him to film with some good stuff. So at that time, we were looking at Learning from Losers. We were doing that. And so this is the book that I've had a copy of this book. This is your own. I've had a copy of this book for probably 10 or 12 years. And I kind of launched out of that with the first two. I think it was first two. But anyway, it's called Famous Jerks of the Bible. And that's, learning from losers. People that messed up, how they messed up, and how they can get right. And so what I want to do is I want to give you this book. I'm going to ask you to read it. I've got a lot of books as gifts over the years, and like, read that? Sure. Didn't read it. I want you to read it. Okay? Will you do that? All right. I'm going to ask you guys if you'll do a verbal prayer, and almost, if you'll come right up here, if he will represent all of our young people in this room, and then also all of you guys, that we take this contending for our faith. Because it says, Peter says, always, 1 Peter chapter 3, always be ready. Just be ready. Well, put yourself in a football game. If you're ready, this is your stance. Paul talked, put on the full armor. Be ready. Always be ready to give an answer for the reason you have hope. Always be ready to contend. And so these will be out at our exits. I'll ask you two guys to put them out here. Always be ready to give an answer to why do you believe that Bible? Well, it's a pretty good, solid history book. It's never been disproven. They kind of made fun of the dude who was digging up who didn't really believe the Bible. They kind of made fun of him, but then all of a sudden they were proved wrong. The Bible's a solid history book. It's a pretty solid, as much science is in there, pretty solid. Pretty solid. So if you guys will pray for him and us. Tim, if you'll pray first.
Most gracious Heavenly
Thank you. Kind of you guys go back to school, be ready. Be ready for the world to get you. What about you? False teachers within the church, we talked about. False teachers without the church, outside the church. What about you? Have you made your statement of faith? Different congregations, different denominations do different ways. But here's what we do. I believe that Jesus is the Christ. I believe that He's the Son of God. I believe that He was sent to pay a price that I couldn't pay. And I believe the tomb is empty, not from any other reason except that God is God and He rose from the dead. And He's the first fruits of our resurrection. We're going to stand, and if you have not made that statement,